I said, not have to test it in reality. Out of that, though, we're also going to see a lot of the folks that have done work here in the past come back. At least we believe so. Or the next generation of that same kind of work will happen here. Dr. Bill Zielinski did some of his early work here on pine marten. And Bill would like to come back and see what's happening with pine marten before we start these treatments, and then see what's happening after the treatments are put in place. We'd like to know that too, because we'd like to know more about what the effects are of our various treatments. And so the partnership, and it's fun because over time, Jeff and others have educated themselves about what might happen here and what we might do. And so this partnership we're forming is probably as good as I could have ever imagined it being. And I think that it will get only better as time goes on. And I think this is the first in a series of projects that we may design here. And so my thought is we have an experimental forest where we're going to bring the universities to the table. We're going to bring Pacific Southwest Range and Forest Experiment Station and perhaps other researchers from our system, and the administration side, and we're all going to be identifying the problems and learning together what are the answers over time. And I have to tell you, it's really exciting. Thank you all for coming. I think this is just really a special day and a new beginning. I'm sorry.
Am I?
You want to do that first? He's the.
Oh, you guys are in suits. Go ahead.
See how easy it is, Steve?
I'd like to introduce Ann Bartuska.
I don't know much about Ann other than she was the Steve. By basically introducing yourself to us and then sharing with you your applause.
Well, good morning. And you can hear me well enough in the back? Nope? Great. I am Ann Bartuska. I'm actually Deputy Chief for Research and Development for the Forest Service, which means that I have responsibility for our entire research portfolio. And I am just so pleased to be out here, to be both been invited to be part of this celebration, but also have a chance to sit here in the sun, listen to that creek down there. And it was actually particularly effective as we were watching the slides to have just total silence and just hear the creek and the wind in the background. I also wish I had my little net here because I noticed quite a few bugs flying around. We could have had it all to the students to well, this is exciting for a whole lot of different reasons. Aside from the fact that I think it's reinforcing a partnership among the Forest Service research, management, and UC Berkeley systems, other partners involved in dealing with experimental forest ranges. And it's always good to acknowledge those partnerships. But actually, in the bigger scheme of things, which is I think why I've been asked to come here, we're just coming off our centennial as an agency. And one of the things that we really learned in the Forest Service, I learned as part of the centennial celebration, is that we were founded on ensuring we had quality water for the country by ensuring we had quality watersheds. And so the fact that we are celebrating the establishment of another experimental forest and range, which is all about water and water interacting with forests, I think it just hits home why we came into existence as an organization, but also why we established research programs. We actually started our very first research project in the agency in 1907. It was a watershed project in Colorado. So this is a tremendous legacy. I don't know if everybody recognizes that this is the first experimental forest and range site being added to the system in 35 years. It's a very special event for us. It is coming into a network that we have really come to think of as a national asset. It's a national treasure. We are now, this will be the 84th site. It encompasses more than 75% of the biome of the United States. So if you looked across the map and you deleted all the ag sector, we pretty much cover the range of issues and territories that we have responsibility for. And as a nation in terms of just how natural resources are functioning. So being able to anchor what goes on the West Coast, being able to anchor what goes on in the Sierra Nevadas with the Sagehen site, I think just really adds so much more value to the overall network. I think what we're all finding in the scientific community and the management community is that we are now turning towards these kinds of networks as the foundation for understanding how systems work. Some of you I know have heard about NEON, some of you have heard about WASI and these acronyms that are out there. What it really means is that as a country, science and managers are saying we need to have these national networks and national networks of observatories to really make a difference. And the important thing to me of experimental forests and ranges is not only that they bring quality science to the table, but you've got managers at the table at the same time. And so you're really trying to partner the science with the management. So again, it's very exciting. This idea of having it as a national asset means that we are being able to invest in long-term research, that we can establish patterns that are on the landscape that no one else really can. And I think, again, it's a partnership where we can have these places that are almost in perpetuity, where we are nearly 100 years in some sites. So the investment that we as an agency are making in experimental forests and ranges, and then you couple it with the universities to bring their scientific expertise, I think we really have a winning prospect here. And I think it just brings more and more attention to the values that we have in these lands. I think one of the real preeminent parts about why Sagehen Creek is such a valuable addition to our system is just the quality of work that UC Berkeley has been doing here over the last 50 years. I know we have some former students in the audience who've done seminal work and have really contributed to the efforts that have taken place here. In fact, I noticed in one of your slides that one of the instrumentation packages here is the NADP, the National Asset Acquisition Program. That's where I started my first post-PhD work, was in acid rain, and helping create that network means that we know more about what has been going on with atmospheric chemistry in this country than any place else in the world. And to be able to have Sagehen as part of that system just adds again to the value. So it's very exciting. I am just totally thrilled that we're able to add this site. Totally thrilled that we have this partnership with UC Berkeley, and we reinforce the partnership with Tahoe National Forest and the region as a research organization, and that we actually will be able to contribute to this legacy of quality science and management that sites like this really add value to. So I'm going to get out of the sunshine here and sit down and listen to others. But again, thank you very much for being part of this. I'm just really excited to be here for the day and getting a chance to see what this watershed's all about. Thank you.
I saw him over here scrambling. Do that. You okay? Right, good. Well, I'll introduce myself here.
I'm Bernie Weingart. I'm the regional forester for the Pacific Southwest Regional Forest Service. I've been here as regional forester for a year.
This month, and prior to that I was here about 5 years as a deputy regional forester for resources, and but I have to admit this is my first time into Sagehen, and it's incredible, and so I echo what Ann said, and it's been wonderful just to drive in here and visiting folks here, and so it's really neat, and you know, I can't begin to tell you how thrilled I am to be the recipient, Pacific Southwest Region, Region 5, of the first, or the newest, experimental forest. I think it's pretty neat because we're also fortunate that just recently announced in Hawaii, we have a new experimental forest in Hawaii, which we also play a role in managing. PSW and ourselves, through our state and private branch, work together in cooperation with the state of Hawaii. And so it's quite a pleasure to see these coming online and what the potential they bring. You know, currently in forest management, you know, and you share the multitude of issues that we're facing today. You know, I can go down the list from global climate change, invasive species, the fuels buildup that Joanne talked about, water quality, quantity, you know, T&E and species, you know, sensitive species and their habitats. I mean, the list just goes on. And quite frankly, I know that we're going to have the best science available to us in order in natural resources in order to be able to address those issues. And for us to be able to continue to adapt our management on national forests in a way that uses the best information possible, continues to feed it, and allows us to continue to move forward and not keep old practices in place just because they're traditional. I think we're really fortunate to have experimental forests. I mean, a place where we can do natural resource research and take that information and make it available to our practicing land managers. I mean, we're really fortunate to have that. I think that, I work with a lot of the state agencies and other federal agencies, and they don't have that branch tied to their agency typically, and so we're just really lucky. And I think it's really appropriate that Sagehen, become part of the network. As Jeff pointed out, you've been at it here over 50 years, and I know that some of that time, the amount of research being done has fluctuated, but I'm really pleased to see that, recently this resurgence of interest and energy and research results coming out of here. I think that what I see really makes me feel like Sagehen Experimental Forest is definitely going to be a success in the future, and provide us a lot of that information and that we need as land managers to do a better job in these complex ecosystems that we're just, every day we learn something new in them. I really need to back up and just thank everybody who's been involved with this in the past. You show the past history of folks, and there's a lot of dedication there. There's a lot of heart and soul been put into it, and I thank you. But I also thank you and really thank the folks, and Jeff, the recent folks, you and others who have stepped up and really made this possible for the destination of and I just look forward to not only this legacy but this future achievements that can be made here. I look forward how that's going to be intertwined into our management and just we can take it from where it's been here to another level, and I think the public's going to be the better for it because of what you'll see, improved management of the national forest across the forests of California and I think beyond. So with that, I thank you, and thanks for coming out and attending this celebration.
I don't want you up here, Jeff.
I'm Jim Siddell, and I'm the director of the Pacific Southwest Research Station. And I've been here in California for about 2 years. In a prior life, I was an aquatic ecologist with primarily most of my career with the Forest Service, and actually used the seminal work on trout and beaver and the aquatic insect work that was done here at Sagehen Creek as we developed our research program there on the Andrews Experimental Forest in Oregon. And so it's a real thrill to me to be part of establishment of an experimental forest and to get back to my roots, which was research on experimental forests, and reunited with an old friend and colleague, Steve Eubanks, who used to work with on the Andrews. Where does this fit in the Forest Service mission-oriented research, particularly in the Pacific Southwest region here, which is California and Hawaii? This is the 12th experimental forest, the first in 44 years. The last one was Casper Creek on the Jackson Demonstration Forest near Fort Bragg. These 12 areas now form about 75,000 acres, and they span the gamut from Northern California and the Redwoods to San Dimas in Southern California. When you couple that with the 150,000 acres of research natural areas which are located on the national forest here in California, it amounts to about 225,000 acres dedicated to research, and specifically, formally, and legally dedicated to research in the state of California. It makes a huge network, particularly when you couple that with the UC reserve system. A very powerful network for looking at future trends and problems. We view these experimental forests as our lifeline and our basic focal point into the future. And this is going to be a focal point for partnerships. And really, Forest Service research is not going to survive and thrive unless it ties up very tightly institutionally, not just scientist to scientist, but institutionally with universities and other private NGOs. We look at Sagehen Creek as being the vibrant focal point of a cluster. We have Onion Creek Experimental Forest right over the ridge on the north side. The station saw fit to give to Cal Berkeley the Snow Lab, which is one of the longest running snow labs here, right at the top of the ridge. And then we are very pleased and excited to be working with a very unique and exciting group of folks from the National Forest, the university, and the North Fork Association and the Chickering Association to develop even a broader vision of a larger subbasin of research. So that partnership, I think, is very important and is really part of our future. These experimental forests, in my mind, are our competitive advantage in Forest Service research. I view them as centers of discovery where I think many new things are going to come out. Many things have come out, from identification of new species to relationships among forests and wildlife. I look at them as places where long-term data sets can be used to solve future natural resource issues and problems and lead into management as well as detect trends. And I look at a place where these are of a size and scale that you can actually do landscape experiments and not just observe. And then collectively they form this network which Ann talked about, and which we're very thrilled to be part of. This state of California is unique among states in having such a huge university network as well as our Forest Service network, so that we can cover all the life zones and basically look at a Cal ecological observatory network. When you look at Sagehen, what we look at in terms of this as this vibrant focal point that really services 10 to 12 million people from San Francisco east and from Reno west, and that this is a major part of servicing and being of value and relevance to a large part of California's population. And so we're just thrilled and proud to be part of it, and I'm very thrilled and glad that you're here. Thanks.
Don't get up, Jeff. Good morning. My name is Steve Eubanks. I'm the forest supervisor here on the Tahoe Forest, and you know, it'd be an understatement for me to say it's really a pleasure for me to be here to be part of a dedication of the experimental forest. I want to talk a little bit about, I guess, importance of experimental forest, but I want to talk about a little bit of the recent history. We heard the 50 years of history from Jeff, and I want to focus a little bit on the more recent history. But talking first about specifically about the importance of experimental forests from the perspective of the on-the-ground land manager. I've had the good fortune of working with research throughout most of my career, which is a really long career now, Jim. And yeah, it seems long sometimes. But kept my hair. And interestingly enough, a lot of that working with research has been centered around experimental forests, and it has been an extremely beneficial learning experience for me working with researchers in that forum. But it is in general for land managers to have a place that is a center of excellence like an experimental forest, and particularly having a site like Sagehen Field Station to come to A place like this is a magnet for research. It brings people together. It brings research projects here. People can use this site as a way of saying, hey, look at we've got 50 years or over 50 years now of data. Researchers can use that to attract grants. They come here. They use this site as a center for their research, but significantly for us is that it's a place that managers can come together with researchers and learn together, go out in the field together, and not just read publications that might come out 3 or 4 or 5 years after the research occurs, but to be here on the ground talking about things firsthand. It's an opportunity for managers also to come together and influence research from the standpoint of what research actually occurs and how it occurs and what kinds of things are important to managers. It's a place where synergy really occurs between researchers and managers. So from that perspective, you know, that was happening to some extent here already, obviously, having a field station here like Sagehen. But I think having the formal designation as an experimental forest is going to help further that. And so I'm really pleased to be part of that. Now, let me get back to a little bit of the recent history. You know, I'm a newcomer. You know, Jeff's PowerPoint was over 50 years of history at this site. I've been here, I think the first time I actually came here was about 7 years ago. When I came to the Tahoe Forest, one of the things that was interesting was I interacted with researchers again from PSW, and obviously Joanne Robique is the ranger here. One of the things that kept coming up was people talking about the importance of this site, the importance of Sagehen, and significantly as well, how important this site could be. At that particular time, you know, Jeff talked about the roller coaster ride. The roller coaster was pretty much down, I think, at that point, and might even have been continuing down at that point. For a number of reasons, you know, that happened. But through all of the discussions, we had a meeting in August of 1999 that brought together a lot of folks who were very concerned about Sagehen. Folks from the local community, folks from Berkeley, folks from the Forest Service, folks who had been prior researchers here on the site. People that really had a feel for it, and the community was a strong part of that. It was really interesting that, as I said, the roller coaster was probably going down. The fact, the only reason it wasn't on its last legs, I think, at that point was that the community had rallied and continued a lot of support. But anyway, we got a meeting together and talked about, you know, what could Sagehen be and what do we want it to be. And it was really interesting. We still have a vision document. We have all the goals and objectives, all those kinds of things that, you know, we could publish for you if you'd really like a copy. But it was interesting that the number one thing that folks felt was important for this site was to bring a site manager or site director here. A site director who could not just be somebody who's going to maintain buildings, although in this case I think Jeff is probably and Farthen have done a fair amount of that, but somebody who could act really as an ambassador, somebody that could interact with researchers, managers, who could be the go-between with the local community, with all of these different entities that could come together around a site like this, you know, a field station in an experimental forest. And it was interesting then that, you know, some of us thought, geez, you know, how about in the next 2 or 3 months we'd go do that? But it took a little longer. It only took about a year. And what was interesting, to me, there were really 3 significant things that happened. Not only 3, but there were 3 key things that happened. The first was that the University of California at Berkeley really stepped up to the plate, and I think, you know, it was really... I'm sorry I don't remember all the terms of which offices are which. You guys are a bigger bureaucracy than the government. But it was the vice chancellor for whatever, and I think it was Beth Burnside that really had a vision that brought it forward, and the number one thing that she did was commit money. She found money in the system somewhere that hadn't been there, and the first thing that she did was hired a site director. And actually I should say site directors, because you know, Jeff and Farthen came here. You know, just a sort of an aside, you remember Jeff's slide program? You saw the owl that was sitting there like this? with its eyes big. I think that was probably Jeff and Farthen's reaction when they came here, when they found out what job they were going to have. But they came here, and it was almost immediate that you could see things start to happen. And I can't tell you all of the things that happened, but it was really the implementation of that original vision of getting somebody here who was really special and could serve as that ambassador, and it has happened. And again, I can't tell you everything that they have done. I know from being up here, it's lots and lots of things, from building buildings to making contacts in every corner of this state, and probably beyond. But that was really significant. Another significant thing was getting Jim Kirshner back as the faculty advisor. Jim is somebody who has a passion for this place, but also has a history. He understands what's gone on here and has a feeling for this place. And so, you know, those three things, the university stepping up, hiring a site director, getting Jim Kirshner back here, have been an amazing series of steps on the road to where we are today to dedicate this new experimental forest. And so I really thank the university for taking those steps. I think they were big ones. So, you know, sort of in summary, you know, we're here to dedicate an experimental forest. We're here to recognize the contributions of people going back over 50 years. And as I look forward another 25 or 50 years, I probably won't be here then unless science really comes through. But as I look forward that time period, I think people are going to be on this site, and they're going to be thanking and recognizing all of those contributions of folks, not only going back to Stark or Leopold, but all the people that are sitting right here now. And so everybody deserves a big hand. Thank you.
I know this guy. When we were hired and started working here, we didn't have a boss, which is kind of an interesting situation to be in. We had a responsibility, and we had basically some goals, and basically we were just given the ball and said, we want you to take it, and we want you to kind of head off in that direction. And it took us about a year to figure out that that we are up here, and then there's the world called the University of California, Berkeley, which is down there, and there's a big distance between the two. And what we learned through Beth's office and staff and herself was that you really need to have the right faculty person to help you in that world. And so we were able to actually recruit our own boss, Jim Kirshner, who I'm very proud to introduce today. Jim's wonderful. He understands where we need to go here. He understands why we need to do it, and he's very good at helping us figure out how to get that done. So, Jim Kirshner.
And we have some visuals here in a minute as soon as they come up. Let me say at the outset, I have lived long enough to have accumulated a bunch of different titles. I am a professor in the Department of Earth and Planetary Science at Berkeley. I'm also the Richard and Rhoda Goldman Distinguished Professor for the Physical Sciences at Berkeley. But the titles that I'm really proud of are that I'm the director of Sagehen Creek Field Station and the director of Berkeley's Central Sierra Field Research Stations. And one reason I'm very proud of that, and very happy to have those titles, is because of the wonderful people I've had a chance to work with in that role. And today I'd like to acknowledge in particular 5 of them, all of whom are here today. The first is Jeff Brown, the manager here. The second is Farthen Felix, the assistant manager, and Jeff's wife. Or shall I say that Jeff is Farthen's husband? I'm not sure which is the priority here. Third is Joanne Robique. The fourth is Steve Eubanks. And the fifth is Jim Siddell. And every one of those individuals has been absolutely pivotal, not only in getting us here today with the designation of Sagehen Experimental Forest, but also with the survival of Sagehen Creek Field Station as a viable and thriving center for research and education in the Sierra Nevada. I think they all deserve a big round of applause for the work they've done. My own little way, do something to further the work of people in these remarkable ecosystems in the Sierra Nevada. Now, I need to today introduce two people who unfortunately are not able to be here. One is Beth Burnside, the Vice Chancellor for Research at Berkeley, and she is the head of the branch of Berkeley that funds this field station. She unfortunately had a prior commitment that was unbreakable and that was on the other side of the country. And it is simply physically impossible until science actually advances to the point where she can move at the speed of light. It is simply impossible for her to be here today. The second is Alex Glazer, who's the director of the university's natural reserve system that spans all 10 campuses and 35 natural reserves. He intended to be here today and would have been here today except for having to undergo emergency quadruple bypass surgery a few weeks ago. He is recovering quite well, but for various reasons, his doctors absolutely insisted that a trip to high altitude was not in his long-term interests. And so he sends his regrets. I've gotten 2 emails from him in the last 24 hours expressing how sorry he is that he can't be here. Now, you are there at that little red dot on the banks of Sagehen Creek, and surrounding you is an area known as Sagehen Creek Field Station, which has been operating under a special use permit with the Forest Service since the 1950s, and Jeff described how that came about those years ago. What we're here to celebrate today is the establishment of Sagehen Experimental Forest in the surrounding watershed of Sagehen Creek, and to celebrate the 50-plus year of record of research and education that has been accumulated over that time and that will hopefully be furthered going forward by what we are doing today. Sagehen is one of a network of field stations here in the Sierra Nevada, which we term the Central Sierra Field Research Stations. So Sagehen Creek Field Station and the new Sagehen Experimental Forest are up there. For those of you who can still see this, I know the sun is blindingly bright. The Sierra Crest runs here, Interstate 80 runs there, okay, roughly through the middle of the picture in both directions. At the Sierra Crest, the university also operates the Central Sierra Snow Laboratory. It is the only manned high-altitude snow research facility in the western United States that still exists. The university also operates Onion Creek Experimental Forest. Now, both the Sierra Snow Lab and Onion Creek are partnerships with the National Forest System. The university also has an agreement with private landowners that has established the Chickling American River Reserve, which is a research area in the North Fork of the American River, and through another agreement has established the North Fork Reserve with the North Fork Association, again in the headwaters of the North Fork of the American River. And we are now in the process of finalizing, once all the lawyers have their say about it, finalizing an agreement to establish a joint conservation and research area that ties together those areas and the surrounding national forest lands into what will be one of the largest contiguous areas devoted to conservation and research, and one of the largest, shall we say, protected areas of old-growth forest outside of the national parks in the Sierra Nevada. It will comprise roughly 20,000 acres, roughly 30 square miles of land, and represents, I think, a unique and promising public, as in Forest Service, public as in university, private as in these landowner organizations, collaborative enterprise to further our joint objective of preserving
the conservation values of the land and furthering research on that land. I was asked today to talk briefly about a few of the research projects that are underway here at Sagehen, and I was going to describe the strategically placed land area treatments, or SPLATs, but since Joanne has done such a great job of that, I will...
I'm sorry.
That's fine, actually. That's fine, because that lets me tell a little story. When I first came on board as director of this field station, the first time, I've had 2 tenures as director, and we won't go into the details of that, I had the impression that what one needed to do here was just don't touch anything. It's fine the way it is. Don't touch anything. Right? I took this picture across the creek and up the way a little bit, and this view was what changed my mind about that. Because when I saw this, I realized that don't touch anything is probably not a viable option for the long term here. And that because of the fire risk here, there is a need to change the fuel loading in this forest. Now, I'm not a forester. I'm not trained as a forester. You don't need to be trained as a forester to walk around here when you walk the land and realize that there are issues that need to be addressed. Those issues don't need to be addressed just in the Sagehen Basin. Those issues need to be addressed in millions of acres of the Sierra Nevada, and it's something that we cannot afford to do wrong. And therefore, learning how to do it right is a very valuable undertaking. And we hope that the work that is done here at Sagehen will make a substantial contribution toward learning how to do it right. Let me describe just a few other projects that are underway now. We have some researchers from UC Davis and the California Department of Fish and Game who are studying some of our largest critters besides us, which would be the bears that live in the Sagehen Basin. I have been told by Jennifer Miller that there are perhaps a dozen or so resident bears in the Sagehen Basin. And they're in the process, the researchers, that is, when I say they, I mean the researchers, are in the process of trying to understand how those bears live on the landscape and how modifying that landscape through procedures like splat treatments will affect how the bears use that landscape. I think that's very important work. We have researchers from UC Davis working on the reestablishment of Lahontan cutthroat trout in Sagehen Creek. Those trout used to be ubiquitous across this part of the Sierra Nevada. For various reasons, they aren't anymore. Bringing them back and understanding how to do that requires significant research, and having a facility like this is pivotal toward doing that work. Rick Carbon, again from Davis. I don't know why these all turned out to be Davis researchers. The splat thing is Berkeley, okay? Rick Carbon from Davis is studying how plants communicate. Now, when I say how plants communicate, you're probably thinking, wow, we really are in California, aren't we?
They think that would be Berkeley.
You think that would be Berkeley, exactly. But it turns out that plants pick up chemical cues from each other and use those cues to modify their behavior, in ways that enhance their survival. And Rick Carbon is in the process of studying that, and that's important work that has been done here at Sagehen. I couldn't get up here without talking about my own work. What the hell, I'm a professor, right? Understanding the hydrology, the geochemistry, and the ecology of snowmelt-dominated watersheds is very important. One of the most valuable natural resources in this state is the snow that accumulates here high in the Sierra Nevada and that runs off as the summer melt progresses, as it is doing right now. And understanding what controls that process is important, in part because the climate is changing in ways that are going to alter the snowmelt regime here. What I have here, for example, is a graph of accumulation and melt of snow for about 25 years, measured at the top of the Sagehen Basin. And then up on top is a graph of the flow in Sagehen Creek year by year, up and down, throughout those 25 years again. The scale on the top is logarithmic, and it spans about a factor of 100 or so. Now, what you'll notice if you look carefully is that big snow years don't mind the high flows. Hydrologists always study high flow. Let's look at low flows, because that's what those Lahontan cutthroat trout care about, and that's what people who want to water their lawns and drink their fluids and flush their toilets care about, right? And you'll see the low flows go up, and then the low flows come down, and then the low flows go up in a very sort of long wave pattern that appears to be tied to whether we have successive high snow years or successive low snow years. And we're finding interesting multi-year memory effects in how water leaves this watershed that we never expected would be there. This is something that Jeff and I literally stumbled over in digital terms, stumbled over when looking at some of the Sagehen data sets. And it simply would never have been known but for the fact that people, for completely different reasons, established Sagehen, for example, as one of the hydrologic benchmark network sites. The U.S. Geological Survey runs benchmark watersheds all around the country and maintains long-term data on their stream flow. Or we couldn't have discovered that if there hadn't been established many years ago, back in the 1970s and early 1980s, a snowmelt monitoring system here in the Sagehen Basin. We are taking this legacy one step further. Several colleagues and I have just secured major funding from the William Morris Keck Foundation. They're the people who built the telescopes on the top of the mountains in Hawaii and so on. They normally build very large research devices like telescopes. This is one of the first times they've ever built something radically different. What we persuaded them to fund is a major initiative to develop the next generation of research infrastructure for hydrology, which is not a single device like a giant telescope. It's instead a lot of little things that you sprinkle across the landscape. Little miniature autonomous weather stations that you can plant all over the landscape that will communicate with each other wirelessly and that can track the flow of moisture through an ecosystem. Not just how much it rains and how much runs off in the stream, but how much water is being taken up through the trees and how that's influencing the microclimate in this area, and how water then is recycled through the canopy, for example. So we are optimistic that building on the backbone of infrastructure we already have here at Sagehen, and this is Jeff and Farthen installing a weather station that the three of us physically carry on our backs to the top of Carpenter Ridge. On the building on that sort of legacy, we hope to advance the methodological approaches through the rest of the country as well. Now, there is lots of other interesting work going on here. I only had a chance to mention a few things today. And my apologies in advance for anyone whose stuff did not get into my PowerPoint file at 1 o'clock this morning when I put this together. I'd like to also talk briefly about the education and outreach work that we do here. So I think it's very important. The Adventure Risk Challenge Program, which was founded and is still run by Katie Zanto, has been very important in taking disadvantaged youth and giving them an intensive several-week course that couples scholarly work and confidence-building outdoor adventures. That program was founded here at Sagehen. It's now in its third year, and we are optimistic that in the near future it's going to be branching out to other locations as well. It's an example of something that, again, has started here and is going big, we hope. Sagehen has also been important for a lot of community outreach and continuing education activities like the Summer Speakers Series and the numerous meetings that various groups have been able to have here to both make use of our facilities and also to experience the environment here that we have in the basin. I'd like to close with 3 thoughts about what experimental forests are. Most obviously, perhaps, experimental forests are living laboratories where scientists can do research and make observations and perform experiments to try to understand better how natural systems work. This can't be done just by computer modeling. This can't be done just by theory. Theory has to be informed by observation and informed by experiment. And these are the kinds of landscapes in which that kind of observation and experimental work can be done. Secondly, I'd like to suggest that experimental forests are living libraries, where we can read the book of life in the language it was originally written, which is the language of organisms living and interacting on a landscape. It's not just their DNA in a test tube in a laboratory. Their DNA matters, but it's not the whole story. And the only way we're going to understand that is by being able to look through the archive of behavior and interaction that we see in the landscape here. And then lastly, I'd like to suggest that experimental forests are living legacies. In 1951, in the snow along the highway there, Doc Needham and Starker Leopold and representatives of the Forest Service made a handshake agreement to establish the field station. I'm optimistic that were they able to see us today, they would be proud of what we've done in the interim, and they would have understood the ups and downs on the road to get here. I'd like to think 50 years ahead, and to hope that 50 years from now, people will look back on what we are doing today, and likewise appreciate that we had the vision to do the smart thing when presented with the opportunity. So in closing, I'd like to thank all of you, because looking around out there, I'm seeing a lot of very familiar faces. All of you have played an important role in bringing us to where we are today. I'd like to thank you for your help, and I'd like to thank you in advance for your help and support in this enterprise as we go forward. Thank you very much.
So it's my turn to stand in the sun. That concludes the dedication. We do have, we ought to move down now to the lower camp to eat. And once we all get down there and get congregated, we have a pretty cool thing that we'd like to share with you down there. So let's head that direction. Steve?
I was going to say 50 years from now.
No, 4 years ago, right before I did my knee, everything. And it's called, let's see, it's not San Joaquin Peak, it's San, I can't think of it. But anyway, it's on that road from Benton to, you know, the
opportunity here at Sagehen to use the research that's done here and at other places such as Sagehen to help support the public in their discussion about forest management, forest health, reducing fire risk in the Sierra Nevada and throughout California. So as we move forward in the next 50 years, I think that there's a great opportunity here to broaden the discussion to other agencies and to the public for the good of the land in California. Thank you.
as I understand.
Well, getting some of this. How you doing? Good.
Yes, yes, it's primarily trees and shrubs.
Yeah,
Right.
that's for sure.
How would this affect? Is it?
Out there, I mean, and so they try to get a variety of varieties. It's been 2 weeks of residency. And in fact, we probably put.
Changing my perception of you.
We probably put. We used to put almost 500,000 liters.
Oh, great. Great. Well, here's one of my cards. I'm at the watershed council. Harry's not watching. Here we go.
You're making me a shepherd?
What he's talking about.
And then you can do it. You can
Borrow one of my
It's like Gary Snyder.
Yeah, I am.
The funders requiring conditions that are onerous to the Forest Service that the reserve system could accommodate with less.
Yeah, great. So send me an email and we can start discussion on various levels. Jeff had actually already mentioned to me because we've been looking at
Which might allow us to
And I didn't really. I sent an email to Beth.
difference doesn't really make wild.
Where are they coming from? They're going to come from Austin Meadows.
Oh, that's
right. Yeah.
Classes from Davis up here. Back in the 70s. Late 80s.
So you did mention that. That's pretty funny.
And,
didn't bring your ecology, your entomology.
Yeah, I'm going to go home and.
I'm very cool.
According to the rain in 7 days. From then on, the entire rest of the winter, the ground oozed water out of everywhere. So from delay, my view, it meant that we finally filled this place back up and the water could. And we're going to actually map out the riparian zone boundaries in here, which will give us yet another great layer of data to add on top of our LiDAR data set to the basin, which is pretty cool. So now let's pile back into the